Welcome back. This week we're going to do something, we're going to change it up just a little bit. We're still doing articulated patterns, but we're going to go off of some of my originals and we're going to go on to a Galloup pattern. It's really tough for me to pick a favorite streamer pattern, but I mean this one, it's about as close as it gets to being a favorite. I mean, I've fished this pattern. It's my go-to. It really is. This is his sex dungeon. There is just so much motion. So the tail was so active, and it stays in the upper portion of the water column. You're able to track it. You're able to see your eats. It's just all around. It probably is my favorite pattern. We're going to do this in yellow today, doing probably 5, 6, 7 different colors, and we're going to do a bigger version of it. I do this in the size we're tying today, and then also I do it in the smaller version for, you know, if I take it back home to Pennsylvania to fish there, or early in the spring sometimes I'll run the smaller ones out here. But for the most part I like tying and fishing these bigger ones. It's just, I don't know, for some reason just tracking them in the water is just very exciting to me. Let's get zoomed out, and then I'm gonna adjust this real quick. It's a one-man crew here, so I hope you're not expecting the finest quality of a production, but we're pretty well centered up from what I can tell on my monitor. Go ahead and get started on this pattern. This is one that I've been tying for years now. Like I said, it is one of my it is my favorite streamer pattern. I just, my go-to. To start this one out, we're going to go with the tail. 2 stacks of marabou plumes. Like I said, we're doing this one in yellow. I run this in black, olive, white, tan, gray, yellow. I think I'd do a rust color. You name it. I mean, I tie them in just about every color possible just because I like this pattern so much. There's the first tail. Next up, we're gonna, same as always, throw some internal flash onto this. 2 strands of Flashaboo. Double it and give you 4 strands. On this side, flip them over. Go ahead and trim it. Grab your second stack of marabou. Just measure this one out. You can wet these plumes. It makes it a little bit easier to work with. I typically don't. I just kind of leave them dry. But if you do wet them, it is a little bit easier to manage your distances and your lengths. You can see I got that one just a little bit long on the top, but that's fine. I like the top to be a little bit longer anyhow. Just slightly. I may have gotten a little carried away on that one. Leave your stacks in for bulk. Just open loop that to the front and run right back over. Now for this, zoom out slightly here. We're going to take just a regular piece of wire and find my junk scissors real quick. Snip that off. take a regular piece of just red brassy size. Yeah, this is brassy size wire. Thought I had small for a second, but brassy is what we got. And just tie this in, and you can see I'll just take this. There's a little tag. I'll loop it back and just tie over top of it, so you kind of have a hook in your wire. It's not critical. It just keeps it from, if you wind up putting a little bit too much tension on this, it does keep it from slipping out. So I tend to just throw a hook on there and wrap over it twice. That way I save myself a few cuss words while I'm tying. For the body of this one, we're going to go with yellow ice dub. Like I said in the last video, I almost use ice dub exclusively for my bodies in one form or fashion. I don't really use a whole lot of chenilles or anything like that anymore. This stuff, it's so easy to work with, and it has, built-in flash, and it's tough to beat. It really is. Our back hook we're using here is a 2461 Daiichi size 2. We're going to use a size 1 for the front. I'll have everything on the material list, as always, at the end of this video. But we'll go ahead and get our bobbin in its cradle. Work on the taper just a little bit and spin. Check the monitor, see how well you can see this on the camera. I may zoom in here just a little bit. Just run this right to the front, and my fingers aren't wanting to work. Here. Alright, now is where the thread that the wire we tied in earlier is going to come into play. We're going to take this Grizzly variant yellow schlappen. I just like it a little bit more than the pure yellow. It kind of breaks the colors up. Maybe a little more appealing to the fly tier's eyes. As usual, fish don't care, but it's a little more appealing to us. We'll go ahead and just pick out our front and back one while I have this out right now. It's almost pure yellow. Now with this, what you can, and I'll zoom in so we can see, you can see this. There comes a point on this schlappen feather. You see how I'm bending this right now? There comes a point to where it's really rigid, like right there. You can see it's a lot more rigid. I have to put a lot more tension on it. It doesn't want to bend on its own. What I like to do is I find a spot where this is bending on its own, and I'll go up. Given that I have enough feather to work with, I'll go up from that just a little bit. If you go trying to work with this rigid portion, sometimes when you wrap it in, it can split. And when it splits, it has a tendency to want to fall apart and everything unravels, and then the cuss words really start coming out. So I found that if you just go with the more flexible portion, and like I said, given that you have enough room to work with, enough material to work with, that saves you a lot of frustration. So we'll throw our half hitch in here. And we'll grab our hackle pliers. When I'm working with the articulated streamers especially, I like these longer hackle pliers. It just allows me to get away from the hook, and I don't wind up having my fingers close, trapping material. It's just a lot easier for me to work with, so that's what I tend to gravitate to. These ones seem to work really well for me. And you just run your schlappen to the back of your hook, grab your wire, and then you want to counter wrap it so you're coming the opposite direction of your schlopping. And then once you have that in place, just rip it right through there, kind of moving it as you go. And it seems you will trap a little bit, it's inevitable, especially with the schlopping. It's a little bit webbier than saddle hackle. You will trap a little bit, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. Take your bodkin through there, you can pick it out, or you can leave it right like this, honestly. Running it this way, it allows you to control your taper to where you know where your thicker, longer feathers or longer fibers are going to be at the front. If you tie it in tail first, like you'll see a lot of folks do, you have to peel some fibers back, you wind up trapping a bunch. I just like it this way, and with the wire in here, it keeps your fly stays together a lot longer. It keeps your if you get a tooth that comes in and catches the schlopping stem, everything unravels and that fly's shot. You got to throw it away. That or bring it back to the bench, strip it down, and start over. But with me, I just like the wire in there. It just holds up so much better. It's more durable. There, we got that pretty well picked out. Next up, we're going to throw a little bulk on the top here. This one's a little sparse compared to what we're going to use in the front, but it's the thing that I use on all the streamers. You want go from sparse to thicker. The closer you get to the front of the fly. And we'll just throw this in here, measure it out. It's going to sit just past where your tail starts. 1, 2, 3. Give a couple tighter wraps on there, and this just adds bulk. I'm not sure if Kelly did this when he originally started tying these patterns, but I did notice after a while, I think he just added a little bit of bulk. It gives a little bit more motion. You can completely omit this step if you want. They caught fish on this fly for years before adding this to it. But it's just something that, like I said, it adds some bulk, adds some motion, it fills the fly out a little bit. So I tend to do that on the majority of the dungeons that I tie these days. We're going to go with 2 rubber legs. And we're just going to put this, if you watched the 10 at 2 video, I explained how I put the rubber legs on, the 2 loose wraps, figure 8 it. 1, 2, you can tighten down, don't pull too hard or you'll wind up cutting right through your legs. This GSP, especially if you're using GSP, it will cut through material. It's just so strong, it's so slick. As you tie, as you spend more time with it, you'll learn its thresholds, how much you can pull for different materials. I've cut through I don't know how much stuff just really torquing on this thread. Go back to my drawer here, and I'm just going to touch this up with some yellow. OCD kicks in full time when I'm tying. You can cut these legs right now. I'm going to, just because I'm going to throw the straw over top of it to keep them out of my way. This completes the back portion of the fly. Key thing with when you're cutting your legs is, and you pull it tight, loosen, and then cut. Don't try to cut them when you're pulling on your legs, because then you'll wind up with real stubby legs and probably wind up getting upset like I did the first couple of times I did it. So keep the tension off when you cut your legs. Next thing up, we're going to go with a Daiichi 2461 size 1, and we're going to swap back over to our nylon thread. This is just a white 6/0. You can use any size color combination that you want. I try to stay away from the 3/0 and up, just because they tend to get pretty bulky. So 6/0 seems to work good for me, but you can use whatever you want. Throw a quick thread base down, and we're going to toss in our this is just a 7/32 dumbbell eye, red, orange, whatever it may be. Looks orange, more orange than red. And let me go back here just a step and explain what I did. So I struggled for a long time getting these eyes to set how I want. You know, I'd wind up having them on here, and then my big fat fingers, I'd, you know, throw this on here and try and work it around, and then I'd wind up dropping them. It would go all over the place. It was just really tough for me to control and keep it right where I want it. So I watch a lot of tying videos, YouTube, you know, anything online. I watch a ton of tying videos, and I watched Rich Strellis one time. You know, I didn't catch it right away, but he threw a quick loop right around the dumbbell eye like this, and I'll do it up here so the camera can see it if you can get past my fingers. But just throw one loop right around your dumbbell eye, and then look, you can walk this right wherever you want, set it on, and you still have control because that loop is on your eye. That was a lifesaver for me. It saved me a ton of frustration, and it's just something little, but I mean, you pick up all these little tricks watching other tyers, watching other people. It just, you know, all the little stuff that you can pick up, you can incorporate into your own tying, and it saves you a lot of time, and winds up making a better fly. So what I do is I just kind of figure eight this over top of the eyes, and then I'll go around the base of it. With that base right there, I have a good thread base down, and then I'll flip my eyes to where they're on the bottom portion, or they're on the bottom side of the hook. When you do this, your hooks are going to run down in the water. If you keep them on top like a clouser style, your hooks are going to ride up. Let me just make sure that we're nice and even here. Everything looks good. Now, the next thing I'll do with this is I'll take a little bit of Zap, and I'll just dab it right on there. You don't need a ton of it. You can go on the top and bottom if you want. It really doesn't seem to make a huge difference if you do. And then I just go through, same thing, I figure eight, and then I go around the bottom. And once I go to the GSP, I'll zoom in so you can see exactly what I'm doing with that. Open loop it forward and back. It just gives you a little bit more of a base to throw in your connection wire. Grab a bead real quick. You'll see I use red beads for everything, mainly because I cover them up. You can match it to the color of fly that you're tying if you want to. I don't find it to be too critical, so I just use red for everything. Feed this back through the bead. And I cut my wire a little bit short there. Just run this right back through. That's gonna work. That'll look good. A little bit. Cut our wire off, and then just go ahead and throw a quick half hitch in here. we're going to swap out threads now. You can see, I mean, that's a good amount of thread that you went through. Just tying your lead eyes on and then your articulation wire. I explained it before. I think the articulation wire grabs better to the nylon because it's not as thick, and it saves me a lot of GSP. So kind of serves two purposes doing it that way. Alright, so what we'll do now is we'll zoom in so you can see what we're doing with these lead eyes. And I'll just turn this slightly so you can see. I have to lean over a little bit, but we're just going to figure eight this right over top and then go around the eyes and under the hook, right like that. And then you can pull tight on this. Be careful how tight you pull, because I've cut through the thread before. Just, I mean, I must have really been getting after it, but you can pull right through that. So here we have our eyes, and I mean, they're locked into place. As soon as that glue kicks, you don't have to worry about it going anywhere. You're set. So we're going to run back, and there's Knoxville in her normal fly tying spot. We're going to run this back. I think I just kicked the camera there. It's a little fuzzy. Yeah, it looks alright. And I'll take the schlappen feather that I used. This is the one that's all cut up. That's the one that I used for the back hook. And I'm going to form the skirt of this fly. Just pick a little portion off and cover up your connection. That's all we're doing with this skirt, is just covering up a connection. You can use marabou, anything that's webby, and is going to cover up, you know, just serve the purpose that you want. All you want it to do is cover up your connection, that's all. I tend to use the schlappen a good bit. Sometimes, depending on what pattern I'm tying, I'll use rabbit strip, but the majority of the time it seems to be the schlappen. I'll just peel two pieces off, set it on the sides, and your connection is pretty well hidden. You can see right there that there's not a, as we look at it, I mean, it's really tough to see the connection. Tie in our wire, and I'll explain a little bit further what I was saying about hooking a piece. As you can see it on this side right here, there's just this little excess that I leave sitting there, and I'll just fold it back over. Forms a little hook, and then I'll tie back down over top of that. And it's just a little bit extra reassurance that it's not going to go slipping out on me when I'm trying to counter wrap my schlappen. Not that I've had that happen before. Get our dubbing loop ready to go. Run that back to the front. And the tool doesn't want to seem to cooperate with me. I don't know what's going on here, but we got to pick this out real quick. Stand by. Yeah, things always go so smooth when you're not recording a video. It's like you go through these things 100 times and nothing ever goes wrong. The second you put the camcorder on, yeah, Murphy's Law takes effect. So anyhow, we're good to go now. Back in business. Build your taper with your ice dub. It's not extremely critical on streamers to have this taper, just because they're so big and you can cover up a lot of mistakes. But when you go with you go tying nymphs and dry flies, your taper becomes very important, especially in nymphs. And we'll just rip this right through here. Tie this off, and then we're going to put our slopping in. This one's pretty well twisted up. I'm going to pick a different piece. Sometimes when they get twisted like that, it can get a little tough to get them to sit how you want. So I try and find a piece. You know, you can see this one. It's nice and straight. Easy to work with. It's not all spiraled. Sometimes in the packaging they get crammed in there pretty good and they wind up spiraled up. I tend to stay away from those just because I like the flies to look pretty, even though the second you put them in the water they don't look the same as when they come off the vise. So, but for some reason I just like the flies to kind of have a good presentation about them. Grab your hackle pliers, and then yep, it's going to spin for me good. Run this all the way to the back. Hey, what are you doing? Back there making some sort of noise. And find my wire. There we go. And then once again, you're going to counter wrap your wire just right through here. And just hold your slopping in place. Come back and cut the excess that you didn't use. Grab some junk scissors. Go ahead and cut your wire. You're set. Grab a marabou plume, peel this back, and we're just working with the tips. We want everything nice and even, creating some bulk on the overwing for this fly. Measure it out just to where it's about to come to a little bit past the eye of the back hook. Toss this on. Here's your bulk. And we got we use 2 rubber legs for the back. For this one, we're going to use 3. Just set this on nice and easy. Come up through, try not to trap a lot of your slopping. Looks like I got pretty lucky there. Now this isn't sitting exactly how I want to. Because I used loose wraps, I can pick this up and move it, and those legs are going to be able to cooperate for me. I do 2 more wraps, tighten it up, my legs are locked into place. I'm going to steal the straw off of this back one and drop it on the floor. What we're going to do is we're going to get all of this stuff out of our way for working with the deer hair. This is a nightmare for some folks, working with deer hair. It's actually one of my favorite materials to work with. I love building bulky heads out of deer hair. For some reason, it's just I love the way it works in the water. I love the profile that it gives off. It pushes a ton of water. I just really enjoy working with this stuff, and I love the way it fishes. So we'll zoom out here as I rattle on about this deer hair. Choosing And getting good deer hair will make or break your experience working with this stuff. It really will. Really will. Kelly has multiple videos up on YouTube to where he explains the difference in deer hairs and how he selects them. I really recommend going through watching those. It makes a ton of sense. I can't do justice to what he did as far as explaining them, but if you want more information on it, just go check it out. I mean, he goes into depths that most fly tyers can't really even comprehend. But anyhow, what we're going to do is we're going to build the collar for our fly. And it's just going to be a collar. We're not going to try to start building the head yet. We're not going to do anything. And what you want is you want to take, if you think you have enough deer hair for your collar, grab a little bit more. You want a good beefy, I mean, you can see this, I mean, that's a ton of deer hair. And then we're just going to go through and clean this up so you can take this by the tips, spin your fingers, and see how it kind of angles out for you. Look at all this stuff that comes out. I mean, that's just, that's an insane amount. And this is actually really good deer hair too, so I mean, to get all of that out, and we may wind up being a little sparse on this. I like it to be a little bit thicker, but we're just going to run with this for the sake of saving a little bit of time. Throw this all in your stacker. And you pull this out, you see how your tips are all nice and even. That's a decent amount. I would have liked it to have been a little bit thicker, but I won't lose too much sleep over it tonight. I'll live with it. So as you can see, I mean, we have some nice even tips the whole way through. And what you want to do is just measure this out. Probably right about to where, somewhere in between the hook point and where the barb is where I like my tips to be lined up with. I try to measure it out up in that general area. And then what we're going to do, once you have it measured out, all of this stuff right here, just clip it off. It's all junk. You don't want to use that in your collar. Now you take your thread and you spin it like this. If you spin it to the right, when you take your tension off, you can see that little loop right there. It's going to be going to the back of the fly, so it's going to be easier to work with. And then all you do is you take this, just a nice loose wrap, nothing real tight just yet, don't worry about getting too tight on this, and then 2 loose wraps, and then I'll put my finger right over the top of it and just kind of spread it out some, and then you can come through this with tighter wraps. And you can see how it has that nice little sunburst collar. And then on the underside, I got a little carried away there, 1 or 2 pieces kind of got on the bottom. I like the underside to be nice and clean to where it gives the profile of a sculpin, the dorsal fins on the sculpin, to where it's just out like this. I don't like stuff being on the underneath side. I'm not going to try not to get too picky on this right now because I could sit here and clip at this forever, but I'll just leave it be for now. Once I turn the camera off, I'll clip it up the rest of the way. But we're going to go through and finish this fly up. And we'll get zoomed in a little bit so you can see a little bit how we're going to work with this deer hair. Same thing as before. You have this, you have all of this fuzz and everything in there. Just run it through your comb real quick, get the junk out. You can see there's the junk. You're not going to be able to spin behind the eyes on this one. It's almost impossible to spin deer hair behind the eyes. So you wind up stacking it, but you still want all of that fuzz out of there, so you're not trapping all that stuff. Now what I do with this is I take the tips and I cut them off. It just leads me away from being confused as to what the tips are from here and the tips are in the stuff that I actually tie in for the head. Just makes it a little bit easier for me. And then 1, 2, you can see your threads starting to disappear, and then just pull down. You pull down tight, you can see how I got deer hair all up my nose and everything. It's all over the place, but you can see how the top portion of that head is starting to fill out a little bit. Like I said, behind the lead eyes, it's really tough, if not impossible, to spin deer hair. So we're going to throw a bottom stack in. I'm cleaning the deer hair out right now. The bottom stack doesn't need to be near as thick as the top. And same thing, I'm just going to take this and cut off all of my tips. Put this bottom stack in and grab it with your finger underneath, and you can run it right through what you just tied. Use the same thread path and just kind of work it in there. 1, 2 loose wraps and then a tighter one, and then we'll spin this around. You can see it fills everything out how you want it to. There's no open spaces, it's going to be a nice full head, easy to trim. So I try and peel all of this back, and then I go right in front of the eyes. And you're going to trap a little bit right here. I actually got away with not trapping too much, but it's not a big deal. So now this is the last chunk of deer hair that we're going to tie in. And after you tie so many of these, after you work with them for a little while, you kind of have a feel of how much deer hair you need for each section. It's kind of tough for me to explain. I guess one reference that a lot of people use is like a popsicle stick width. That's probably about what you're using right here, maybe a little bit more. It's just something that you wind up getting a feel for after a while. You tie 1 or 2 of them, you're like, I could have used more here, more there. I encourage people to take notes too. Like when I'm going tying new patterns, I'll take notes on what I want to do different, because eventually I wind up forgetting as I'm tying, so it makes it a lot easier for me to go back, look at my notes, and be like, okay, yeah, add a little bit more deer hair here, less on that step, whatever it may be. But if I could quit rambling here, maybe we could get this fly finished. But I do tend to ramble a decent amount when I'm tying. So okay, this one should be able to spin for you. So we're right in front of the eyes. You got the 1, 2 pulls, then you go with a half, and there we go. We got it to spin. And all you're looking for is just that rotation. You can see how everything kind of lays out. You got your rotation, and I got a little bit. How close did we get to the eye here? We actually did all right. I don't think I'm gonna have to stack any of this. No, I don't like pushing the hair back and making it real compact. I like the head to be bulky yet loose. It sheds water a lot quicker, and it's not near as buoyant as the real compact heads. So we're just gonna whip finish this. I'm going to wind up trapping a few of these, I think. It's alright, I'll just cut them off. And then this is the part that will drive most people who don't like working with deer hair. This is the part that will drive them absolutely crazy. Trimming this up, I'm getting all the excess hair out of the way right now. get a double-sided razor. You know, just a regular. You can get them at the Walgreens. You know, most of the pharmacies still carry them. Most important thing about this is to have a good, you know, you may get 3, 4, 5 flies if you're lucky out of one side of this. Just make sure that you always have a good sharp razor, because it can really frustrate you if you're cutting deer hair with a dull razor. And the bottom portion of this is going to be flat, so just kind of run your razor right through that. You can see how that bottom portion is nice and flat. And then what we'll do is take, and I still have my straw in here, so what I do is I take that straw and I'm going to try to trim this to where you can see it a little bit better on the camera. And then I'm kind of leaning over here so I can't see it too well, but I just push my straw up against the head, and that allows me to run my razor blade right to my straw without having to worry about cutting any of the material underneath. I don't have to worry about messing up my rubber legs or anything. Just makes a little bit cleaner of a look to it. And you can really get carried away trimming this stuff up. You really can. Just be careful trying to perfect it too much. You can go trim, trim, and trim, and next thing you know, you got no head left, and you're like, oh, that was a fun half hour of time flies and nothing to show for it. So just take your blade and give it a bend, and then you'll just push it right through up to your collar. It usually takes me a couple trips through this to get everything how I want it and get close to my collar. You can see we're getting pretty close. Like I said, that collar is not near as bulky as I typically like them. I'd like them to be a lot thicker. Some of it got away from me, but I mean, you can still get the general idea of what we're doing. Now, the same concept that I used with the straw, you can use with your thumbnail on this. I cover up my collar with my thumbnail, or with my thumb, and then I run the razor blade right to my nail. You wind up having to, you go tying, you know, a couple dozen of these and you use this technique, you wind up, it looks like just a bunch of razor blade lines on your thumbnail. It looks kind of funny, but oh well. I'd rather have a good looking fly than I would a good looking thumbnail. You can see that nice bulky collar right there. Not bulky as I would like it to be, but it's going to get the job done. This dog will hunt. And then to finish this up, we're getting there. I swear we're getting close. I'll take this out of the vise and I'll run this away from me, and then I'll just kind of shape the front of the head how I want it. It's easier to do this from behind like this than it is trying to cut this way, because you're cutting with it. You want to try and cut against the grain, and this allows you to just shape your head how you want it a little bit easier and a little bit quicker. I'm not going to get too picky on this, because like I said, you can sit here and pick for hours trying to get the perfect looking head, and the second it goes in the water and you hook up on a fish, it's not a perfect looking head anymore. What I do like though is I like being able to see the eyes, so I kind of just trim slightly around there so you can see the eye a lot better. There's a few wild hairs in this, but like I said, I'm trying not to get too picky while the camera's going. And that is the end of your deer hair. After that, you can take your straw off that's holding all of your material back. Same thing as the back hook. Pull down tight on your, get things nice and even, pull down, let it loose, and then trim. Right there are your rubber legs. And that is the finished articulated Kelly Galloup sex dungeon. If you have any questions, have any suggestions to make these videos better, please just send them in the comments, let me know, and I'll try to make some improvements or answer any questions that you guys have. We'll catch you on the next fly. Thanks.